welcome to Bite-Sized Buyers, the podcast that brings you the latest in technology news from the unique perspective of global technology procurement experts. Today, you've got myself, Sam Harris.
And I am Shane Best.
So join us as we delve into the most pressing topics in the world of technology and offer insights and analysis that you won't find anywhere else. On today's episode, we have an open letter from the CISO at JP Chase, a return of the tariffs, and finally the question, why do so many managed service providers sponsor every single global sporting event? So without further ado, let's get into it. Okay, so first story today is the letter, and I think it's a rather amazing story, really. Letter from Patrick Opet, the Chief Information Security Officer for JP Chase. And he has recently written and published an open letter specifically to the software as a service providers. And he's called for them to urgently reprioritize security and to bring it alongside the likes of launching new features, new products, and looking also to implement robust controls to protect customers from known vulnerabilities that already exist. And there's three key reasons in his letter that he calls out that I think are worth covering quickly. The first one is vulnerability or outage is now impacting a disproportionate number of users. And the reason being that, as we know, in a number of key areas, there are either one or a handful of providers that control almost the entire marketplace, from that monopolistic to oligopolistic situation. And therefore, if there is an issue with that particular provider, it's going to disproportionately impact a number of users around the world on that basis. The second thing is that quite simply, because of that situation, feature deployment has been prioritized over security. And the reason I say that links to the first reason, or the first call out from Patrick, is that suppliers have focused on market share and eliminating competition where it arises, and they've done so through aggressively deploying new features and investing in improvements and enhancements, and underinvesting potentially, according to the letter, in security. And then the third and final point is that the security architecture needs significant modernization. It's the traditional security models would have very strict segmentation between your internal resources, your crown jewels, and then the external interactions, and done very deliberately so, right, to protect the core systems. However, software as a service means that can't happen in the same way. Well, that means then that there's direct interactions between these third-party services and your crown jewels internally. So I think it's a massive letter. It's a huge organization, a huge player in the market, and it feels to me, I did a post on LinkedIn, as you've probably seen, Shane, over the weekend. I'm sure some listeners may have seen as well. For me, it feels like, and the analogy I used there was, this is the seawater receding before the tidal wave, the tsunami, comes in and hits. Because if this gathers pace and other organizations follow suit, there is nothing that the software as a service providers can do for me other than change.
Yeah, Sam, here's what's interesting. Obviously, financial services industry is at the forefront of having an urgency to manage risk. But when a letter like that does come out, it certainly gives you pause to think, what path are we headed down, right? Is this the calm before the storm, right? The analogy you gave. And I'll give you some analogies even from the past, right? Having worked in financial services, the move to cloud and the move to anything as a service and moving things from outside your firewall and having complete control of that domain, that old school approach that Pat even references, that was hard, right? That is a big change to move out. And, one of the areas that I want to highlight that I think is a concern, it's not just the IT industry themselves, but it's all the ones driving that demand. And you'll hear me often talk about the balance of quality, cost, delivery, risk. where does risk fit in that prioritization, right? How important is that? Is that what is turning the profit? Is that what's making money? Is that what is expediting speed of execution? Well, the answer is many times no, 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 no. That is that risk prevention lens. And if you really dig deep into that article, it's an amazing juncture that we are likely at in how do you find that right balance and that right speed of execution without moving so fast that you put yourself at risk. I think that's a very important point. Very important point.
I think the timing of it is almost impeccable as well in terms of the situation that's been ongoing in the UK and Europe over the past few weeks. We've seen a number of major institutions like Marks and Spencers and Co-op and an attempt at Harrods that myself and Nick discussed on the podcast last week. But they've been hacked ransomware.
Right.
They've had customer details compromised, and these attacks have been ongoing for weeks and have taken over $1 billion, for example, off the market cap of Marks and Spencers.
Yeah. And Pat mentions this in that article, but it's so much easier today to thread in and through all of those systems that used to
Right.
have more discrete authentication, authorization, right? That used to be much more controlled. And I mean, the analogies, right, even for the non-tech world, is you just think about if we used to travel on a very select number of dirt roads with horse and buggies, and now we have this massive network of highways, trains, planes. Your ability to integrate and move quickly is
Yeah.
astronomical compared to where it used to be, and that's such a challenge.
But
Yeah,
I think the interesting thing for me there is that historically, if we're, and I'm going to generalize a little bit here, and there are exceptions to this rule, and Harrods proves that they are one of those exceptions. But retail has often been an area where it's been deemed, given the difference in regulatory pressure, but also in terms of margins, etc., that cyber has at times been underfunded, and it's been seen as kind of a secondary or an afterthought. Whereas for financial services and other organizations, as you know, Shane, top of mind, right? If you do not have secure systems, if you're wanting to look after people's life savings and life earnings, and you can't protect that, you can have no business. So security has always been a priority. So the fact this letter has come from financial services arena is less surprising. I think the fact it's come from such a senior person, and I wouldn't say out of the blue, but leading the way, should we say? I think that's the surprise for me that it's come from JP Morgan Chase. But I think we're at a juncture now where if retailers are going to be on side as well and saying, hang on a minute, this isn't good enough. We need to invest in security, but so do our providers. We're spending multi-million dollars a year with you. You need to guarantee us protection.
and there's going to be those expectations are going to be extremely high. And Sam, another component of that is if we're thinking more software as a service, maybe versus platform as a service, but how many companies, if this is the type of notes that's coming out from the JP Morgans of the world, how many companies out there with more antiquated systems? There's still a massive presence of risk for a lot of, PII type of information, but how many companies out there are very lagging, even on the hardware side? And how much of this software sits on antiquated hardware, right? To me, that's the complexity too, is the integration of all of that. How challenged are companies to catch up? So there's a burden on the IT providers to continue to do a much stronger, say, DevSecOps versus a DevOps, right? Shift left. I mean, security has got to be integrated into what they do. There's a cost to that. But even with all of that messaging that Pat pushes out, even if the Microsofts, the Salesforces, the Infosys of the world follow suit and start to enhance, what is that still riding on, and what resides within a lot of these companies where a lot of that old antiquated hardware exists? I mean, that's a massive cost and refresh that a lot of companies are going to be challenged with as they try to balance risk management with cost management.
Yeah, and I think for years it's the same argument with cyber, and from a security perspective of we can't afford to do it, but we're now at a point where they can't afford not to.
So next topic, Sam, let's talk a little bit. We've heard very recent news on US China supposedly coming to a halt. A little 90-day sabbatical, I believe, is what they're proposing. It seems to be the never-ending. Yes, we'll go forward. No, we'll not. Um, Clearly, some of the tactics out there of different negotiation strategies, but
Yeah.
we've paused. So that's backed off. Good, bad, indifferent. What does this really mean long term? What are your thoughts on where is this headed, and does this fix anything?
That, no, I think is a short answer. Um, Look, the thing that we've mentioned a few times in the pod in previous episodes has been one of my key focuses is on those large scale IT investment decisions, and we've seen a big pause in those investment decisions because of the uncertainty, waiting for some smoother, calmer waters. And I don't think this does that. As you said, it's a temporary, it's a 90-day pause, and quite honestly, the decision making so far has been so volatile that if you even the most ardent gambler would struggle to justify putting a bet on at the moment that things are going to stay calm for the foreseeable future. Now, there is an argument, I would say, Shane, as well, though, that actually what Trump did by imposing those tariffs initially was show that he would follow through on a threat. You talk about negotiation tactics. Quite often, that there are claims or statements made, and you think, really, do you really mean that? And what the Trump administration has done here is get out ahead of that and actually impose the tariffs, and then go to the negotiating table and say, okay, give us something meaningful back, otherwise, we will do it. We've already proven it will do it.
Yeah, yeah,
So
I need you to negotiate your way out as opposed to me continuing to convince myself and negotiate my way in, right? Here they are, right?
yeah,
This is real. Let's now have a conversation.
yeah, and look, I suspect that there's, or if I was to try and look into the crystal ball and predict what's going to happen, it'll be in 90 days' time, maybe 100 days' time. There'll be a rather rushed and angry announcement about the tariffs being put back in, and maybe even double or triple, whatever he feels like on the day. Um, but I suspect that'll be temporary and again part of a wider negotiation play. The way I would look at this is the UK and US just signed a trade deal, um, quite deliberately on VE Day, um, and it was it was badged in the UK. It was mixed. I'll be honest. The press coverage on it was positive in one half, negative in the other, and it depended on how you viewed it. If you viewed it on what position are we in today versus where we were yesterday, great. The steel tariffs dropped, so UK steel's been in trouble for a long time. The UK government looking to step in and renationalise and protect the steel industry in the UK, or what's left of it, and therefore that was a big success. The farmers were also actually relatively pleased with the outcome. No chlorinated chicken, for example, coming back in, but there was still an allowance to send meat in both directions. The car tariff, significantly reduced, at least the first 100,000 exports from the UK to the US as well. So a lot of good things. However, if you cast your mind back 3 months and then compare it to where we were 3 months ago, it's an awful deal. We've still got 10% tariffs. We're still on the majority of products, we still have tariffs.
Are we playing the long ball? Are we on the right growth forward? Are we just comparing it to
Right.
where we were yesterday, right? There's many ways to look at that. The fear or the challenge, Sam, that I see companies faced with is the negotiation strategy that's happening, right? Those decisions that are happening at the top. Think about many companies' hierarchies. Is the team sitting in the boardroom, it's go, no go, tariff, no tariff. All right, take a break, pause for 90 days. We'll rethink that. You can walk out of there at that level and think, okay, that's good. We made an impact. We got their attention. We'll figure this out. The ripple effect, right? The shock wave that's passing into the global economies, whether it be long-term planning, which you referenced a minute ago, it's really, really difficult. Do I keep my resources? Do I let my resources go? Do I invest? Do I not invest? Do I buy now? Do I buy later? It's very, very difficult for the long-term stuff. But even the tactical stuff, I mean, think about the conversation we just had about some of the antiquated technology. How many people are trying to manage tariffs on a spreadsheet in Excel, right?
Yeah,
How many people just spent thousands of FTE hours trying to figure out how to prepare for this, doing manual manipulative work to then say, well, shit, now what, right? Type of thing. So it's that, like, I just think about how these things trickle down to the doers and the
yeah.
people trying to not just plan long term, but what do I do for tomorrow? There's a lot of noise that it's creating, and that creates fear and pain points, and it's not cost free. There's a cost to all of that, I guess,
Oh,
is a key
of
point.
course. I
There's
mean,
significant cost to all
I wonder how many airplanes full of iPhones Apple are going to try and fly in this time on day 89.
that.
You know, it's even the world's the point behind the joke there though is even the world's largest and most successful organizations are not exempt to this. Yeah, they're lobbying hard, and you see a lot of the famous faces from the world of tech popping up at the White House, or photos emerging of them meeting with the president.
Mhm.
But they're still being hit by it.
Yeah, yeah.
So
It's turbulent. It's turbulent times in that I do struggle to think about how folks are really managing the forecasting, managing the plan. But I've said this to others in these discussions. It's You keep the hope, you keep the optimism, you play the long card, right? You manage through these ups and downs. We don't know now, but it's going to be really interesting in a few years to look back, right? To do that look back. What really changed?
yeah,
What really was the implemented executable impact versus the noise, and that creates a churn. But that is the world we live in, right? Back to the risk conversation. You can't ignore the noise and not manage the risk until it becomes reality, because if you wait until it becomes reality, you're too far behind to manage the risk. So the noise is going to create movement and decisioning, and it's just a challenge that we all have to deal with in turbulent times of unknown futures.
yeah. I think the one thing I would add there, the only one build is I'm gonna steal a phrase from a chap called Nate Silver,
Mhm.
a very famous pollster predictor. He predicts a number of he has predicted a number of the U.S. election outcomes. But he wrote a book called The Signal and the Noise, which is about the art and science of prediction,
Mhm.
and he's trying to find the signals within the noise. There is a lot of noise at the moment, and some of it's hysteria, some of it's whipped up, and some of it is deliberately doing the opposite, right? And he's trying to find those true signals and knowing what to react to. No, he's not burying your head in the sand and blocking out all the noise, but always trying to filter that noise so that you're reacting to the right bits and you're not overreacting to the wrong bits. And I think that's where the key challenge is for
That
organizations.
is exactly it, right? What's the magic filter that takes that white noise out so the real signal that
Yeah.
we should be measuring to react against is the right signal? It's more difficult now than maybe in the recent past to determine what is that filter that takes the white noise out from the real signal, and that's well stated, Sam, because that's the magic bullet that I think everybody's searching for.
So last up today, we have a bit of a different one. It's not necessarily a news topic, but struck me at the weekend as I was or watching old clips of sports, and realized that going back now for a number of years, every major global sporting event seems to be sponsored, and normally, primarily the primary sponsor is an IT services provider or a managed service provider. And in there, largely, you're talking about the likes of, let's use TCS with the marathons, or Emphasis with pretty much every tennis event, or Cognizant or all these organizations, HCL, you'll see them pop up either at football World Cups, or you'll see them as the golf majors, or and it got me thinking, why is it so prolific for those organizations, but not necessarily for others? Now, I'm going to preface that slightly to say that tech in general is a prolific sponsor in the likes of Formula One, and also you see golf. You'll see a number of golfers walking around with the likes of Workday in a prominent position on their collar. I think Phil Mickelson was the first one I saw with Workday, but there's a number, and look, as we're proving now, that marketing works because we're talking about it and we see it and we notice it. But it does raise a question of why IT services.
Mhm. Yeah, it is interesting, Sam, and I will not claim to be a marketing expert, but let's dig into that a little bit. These IT companies absolutely have the ability to work on a very, very global scale. They have the ability to penetrate multiple countries, multiple languages, multiple cultures. Many of them are growing up through Indian roots, let's say, right from the country of India. Maybe not household names in all of the Western world. If you think about big sporting events, Rugby World Cup in 2023 had 1.3 billion people watch it, and they were from multiple countries. American football, global football, big tennis, big golf, right? Formula One. You have the ability to reach a very, very global audience. You're reaching an audience that is passionate about their sport, they're passionate about their team. To me, that is actually a really clever way to start to make these lesser known names household names. Visa
Yeah,
at the Olympics, Coca Cola at the Olympics. People know those names. Workday. People are learning those names. And even a step further, I don't know if this would be part of their campaign, but if you're reaching $1 billion in or a billion individuals in some of these large audiences, there's a very good chance that part of that audience are the folks helping make decisions about technology, right? So it's not just a brand name, but are you just starting to you're doing your branding, you're getting your branding out.
you are.
Is that going to work?
You, yeah, you are. There is a difference between sort of consumer products. So something like Coca Cola, who would appeal to everybody
Right.
watching. You're like, oh, I really fancy a can of Coke right now, versus have someone going, oh, I really could do with some software development services right now.
Yeah,
But having said that, it only takes 5 or 10 people watching who it influences on a large deal, and that's $1 billion plus in revenue return for that advertising campaign. I think the thing for me that, and you touched on it briefly then in terms of the Indian roots. There's two things that I want to cover on that. One's a more difficult topic, and one's a slightly more straightforward one.
Mhm.
The more straightforward one I think is partly around culture. And we know that, for example, luxury goods and being seen as a luxury brand is an aspirational target. And when in the 80s, when India opened the doors to free trade and became, or started on the path to becoming the absolute IT powerhouse that it is now, and business powerhouse that it's becoming, aspiration was a massive part of that. So I think part of it is linked to aspiration and showing that we've made it. We're a global organization, global standing. I think sadly the other side of it, and the more difficult reality, is for a number of years these organizations have been leveled with the criticism that they're cheap and they're low quality. And I spoke last time and made a clear point that I won't reiterate in the exact same words, but that's rubbish. Um, but I think that these organizations have to do more in marketing than others because of where they're from. And I think underneath it all, we have to accept that that is sadly an element of inbuilt racism within society that has said or associated the country of India with cheap labor and low quality. Just as I think for a lot of people, if you say made in China, there's a
Yes.
perception of mass produced lower quality. Whereas if a watch is made in Switzerland, oh my God, unbelievable.
There's absolutely perceptions there, right? There's no doubt about it. That very well could be a component. The marketing departments are still going to expect an ROI, right? I would think
Of
on
course.
these campaigns, but if you blend all of that together, Sam, right, what you're saying, along with whether there's any preconceived judgments, the reality is, are those names well known? And as those companies become more and more and more critical to managing a lot of what we've just been talking about, even in this session, right? They are becoming a householdy type of name. Now, you're right. What's kind of unique, they're not selling a cold beverage, right? They're not selling to that end consumer, but in a way, nor does Visa directly. So to me, a lot of it is it's the power of marketing and psychology starting to flash those names around with successful teams that have teamwork, they have drive, they they have money, right? The
Yeah,
what it's you're starting to create this association of wow, that's even if you don't know what they do. And at some point, as that starts to get
yeah,
integrated, it's putting that name on the roadmap that people are more familiar with and starts to eliminate whether it was conscious biases, unconscious biases, or just flat out lack of awareness. It's
yeah.
interesting.
It,
It's
it
interesting.
it is. I think the slight nuance with Visa there is that Visa are still competing for customers. The Visa and Mastercard debate,
Still makes
obviously.
it to the end.
Yeah, but I think the other side of it as well is there's also the the hospitality, should we say, side of things, and in the IT services industry, as we both know, that's still a very big part of things. That there are events, multiple events every year in which top clients, top customers will be taken along to various sporting events, various nice evening meals, shows, etc., and therefore having the prestige to be able to take somebody in a corporate box to watch the World Cup final will be very attractive to people as well. So there's still an element of that. But I think you're right. It's bringing in that badge of quality and trying to shake off, as I was saying before, shake off that perception of low quality. Means that when people, even as you said, even if they don't necessarily want to be a user of the services, if they see that so and so McDonald's has partnered with Infosys, they go, they're the guys that are involved with Wimbledon or the US Open, or they're cognizant. They're the main sponsor of Aston Martin in the F1, aren't they? And again, that those perceptions are quickly built. So, look, I think it's something we're going to see carry on. I don't see any slowdown or let up in that. Um, in fact, I mentioned this to a contact about 18 months ago now, and he lives in Spain. And I was working on a project with him, actually, an IT services project, and it's a new area to him. And he was going on a holiday midway through with his family, and taking them from Madrid to New York. And he messaged me on holiday. He just touched down in JFK, and he said the entire walk down was just Infosys logo after Infosys logo, all the way down as you land.
And
Um,
it's very interesting. It's a very interesting. It'll be fun to follow and watch. A lot of the fintech companies latched onto this a while back, but again, that's a little bit more customer facing. Like we the consumer touch it. So I think the anomaly here is these are these are managed service IT companies, right? These aren't names that most people reading those signs walking through the airport are familiar with, unless you happen to be in the IT industry yourself, right? So it is interesting. Um,
but,
it's
whereas though, if you go to India and you walk around and you say to in India Tata,
Mhm.
everybody knows who the Tata family are. They know
Mhm.
the various businesses. You ask them about HCL, they know they are household names, and there's an immense amount of pride in India for these organizations. We've spoken before, but just quickly, one of the key uh, challenges other organizations have in going and trying to set up a base in India is, if you're competing with TCS or any of these guys, unless you're going to spend a hell of a lot and pay people well over market odds in terms of salary and package, then that national pride in that name means that it means so much.
Yeah. 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 I like that. That's a good call out. It's very, it's some serious street cred as they start to become known, and gives you a confidence boost. But hopefully beyond that, it latches on to new clients and customers, because you know that marketing is looking for a return as well.
Indeed, indeed. Right, so that concludes another episode of Bite Size Buyers. If you've made it this far, then thank you very much for listening. We'll be back as always at the same time next week. It'd be great to get your views on the slightly different take on stories today. If you've got any feedback on it, please do let us know in the comments down below. And if you've got any new stories you'd like to hear us cover next week, then again, please let us know in the comment section. If you've enjoyed this episode, then please do also support us by giving us a thumbs up and subscribing wherever you listen to your podcasts. I've been Sam Harris.
Shane Best, thank you much.
And until next time.